Today we're going to be building a Makerbeam frame around our MinisForum computer, and its eventual location is going to be here in this rack. We have a nice big space which should be able to accommodate the computer and its power supply quite happily. So let's go and get on with the build. Our first task today is to take our MinisForum computer off the test rack and prepare it for going into a Makerbeam frame. So we will disconnect some of the parts of this just to let us work on it. So we have the power cable, and let's see if we can disconnect the 24-pin power cable. There we go, disconnected. So now we have the power supply disconnected, we can take it off this test frame and we can start to prep our Makerbeam frame. And we will disconnect this from the bottom. Right, there's our power supply disconnected. And one last connection on the motherboard. There we go. So our power supply is now fully disconnected. So now we can concentrate on the frame itself. What I'll do before I go any further is we will put an additional heatsink on this NVMe SSD. They don't appear to be getting very warm, but it doesn't do any harm, and it will extend the life of the SSD if we have one of these heatsinks in place. Onto that NVMe. There we go. So we now have two heat sinks, one on each NVMe SSD. And there is our motherboard completely disconnected from the test frame. Right, okay. So now we have the motherboard, which we're going to be mounting with the ports at the front of the unit. So we want to have our Makerbeam set up so that we'll fit into a rack quite nicely. So we're looking at using Makerbeam struts of approximately this length, which should do us quite nicely, possibly longer. Right, we'll use the full 30cm Makerbeam struts. This will allow us maximum room for getting it into the rack and also for adding on the extra components we want to. As these frames are very much prototypes, we will have to probably take them apart and put them together again a few times until we get a configuration that suits us perfectly. Now we'll want the frame set so that this appears right at the very front. And we just need to do the same for the other side. So let's turn this around. We can always make fine adjustments to these later. We're going to allow a little bit of room at the side just in case we're going to fit a low profile graphics card. Let's turn this around. So that is our beginning to the Makerbeam frame. Now that we have these two successfully attached, we can look to put the front piece in place. Now we have a couple of choices on this one. We're going to put these corner cubes on, which are quite handy for connecting these Makerbeam frames. And this will sit like so. So we will want a right angle on the base of this. So we'll need a couple of these right angle pieces. And we'll put the last two nuts in place here. Right, so that's the base finished. So there is our frame set up with our motherboard quite securely bolted to it. And we've made preparations for the front of the unit, which you can see here. which is sitting quite nicely into the Makerbeam groove. And we will have a vertical bolted on here, which will allow us to have an intake at the top here for the airflow. Let's get this out of the way. Otherwise, we'll need to move this slightly to the side so we can put this vertical in. So I think we will slide this along a little bit, which is the beauty of prototyping. We'll slide this along to about here. And now we will have enough room to put this vertical one in place. And there is the first of the vertical beams for this side of the case now in place. And this will have another one here, which will form the front of our case. As I said, we may be taking these apart several times during construction of our prototype frame, but this will give us a good idea of how it's going to look when it's finished. So there is the beginning of our frame, and we would have another beam at the top here. So we'll just put that one in place temporarily, and then we can concentrate on getting our power supply bolted in at the back. And with these two in place, our horizontal beam will fit in quite nicely there. I'm using these as a guide, as what we have here is the front of our frame, and this is exactly the size we need to fit it into the rack. As you can see, this will be our frame, and we'll use one of our usual polypropylene inserts in here to give us airflow and a front to the case. So now we need to look at fitting our power supply at the back. So I think it might be an idea to fit the fan before we fit power supply. So the idea with our fan is we will use this to pull air over the motherboard. Securely in place. As we can see, the fan is now bolted at the bottom to this frame here, and the air will be sucked in from the front of the unit over the top of the CPU and out the back. So let's see just how our power supply is going to be fitted. So we're also going to have to secure this power connector at the back of the unit. But we'll get the power supply bolted into place first, and then we can check to see if everything is actually working properly. So let's see how we're going to connect this. Right, I think we now have the power supply secured to our frame. We may change the mounting method later, but for the moment it will do. This allows the power connector to slide into place over here. We can put these cables around the side. I'll connect that later. And we can connect this, which is our second fan, to the chassis fan socket on the motherboard. Now all we need to do is to connect the rest of the frame. And these are going to be the thing that connects it all together. And the whole frame comes together on these connections. And the same with the other corner cube. Now with these in place, it makes the base that bit more rigid. So all we need to do now is to connect the remaining parts of the frame. And the same on the other side. This cable's out of the way. And this will allow the top part of the case now to be put in and to complete the frame. Now there are a few missing nuts on the bottom. I've just spotted what I'll need to put in place. But we're just about there. I'll put the remaining parts of this frame together first. Right, with the frame now completed, it's now a lot more rigid and easier to move around. Now we can complete the parts at the bottom, which was... So here is the frame. Obviously at the back we are going to have to mount the connector for the power supply. We're going to have to do some cable routing to make it nice and tidy. And our power switch will be routed to the front, where it can be mounted through the polypropylene fascia we intend putting in this section here. So we can now see the unit is much easier to move around. And obviously we'll need some silicon feet on it to raise it up slightly. And that is us more or less complete. So there we have it. We have the MinisForum motherboard mounted on a Makerbeam frame with an additional cooling fan in place and power supply, all bolted to the Makerbeam frame. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.